The 2022 holiday season did not go off without a hitch for travelers flying with Southwest. The airline was at the center of last week's travel meltdown after it canceled at least 2,500 flights, making up 70% of all canceled flights, leaving thousands upon thousands of travelers stranded.
Southwest committed to improving and was supposed to have resumed, quote, normal scheduling. But according to FlightAware, the airline scrapped 160 flights on Monday. 422 flights were delayed. Several pilots and travel industry experts blame Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, saying he hasn't done enough to prevent the travel crisis. Here to discuss what's at the root of this debacle is friend of the show and host of the Sabby Sabs podcast, Sabrina Salvati. Welcome back, Sabrina.
Good morning.
So nice to see you in the new year. Were your holiday travel plans impacted by this absolute disaster we saw unfolding?
They were not. Luckily, I didn't have to travel this year, but I think that I've heard from enough people to know that it was a disaster for many people, unfortunately.
Yeah, so what is going on? I see a lot of people on the left really taking aim at Buttigieg, who I know is not someone really esteemed by the left in the first place. So I don't know if this is looking for opportunity to capitalize on previous grievance or legitimate frustration with how he has governed this, how he has ruled as the transportation secretary. What is your view of the job he's doing?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's absolutely horrendous that Southwest Airlines is selling tickets for seats that they do not have. So I've heard complaints from numerous people, and there seems to be no accountability there. So everyone is pointing their fingers at Pete because he's the Secretary of Transportation of here. And he just seems to be not around, or he's not doing his job. Now, as Rokana so eloquently tweeted, that himself and Bernie Sanders told Pete Buttigieg several months ago to start implementing fines on these airlines so that this doesn't happen again in the future. Because if we remember, we had issues with Southwest over the summer as well. So Pete Buttigieg had not implemented those fines on Southwest. It appears this has been done to foreign airlines and one domestic airline, but Southwest was not impacted. And there's no accountability for Southwest Airlines. And there seems to be no accountability for Pete Buttigieg as well. So I think we need to ask the question, if Pete Buttigieg is not doing his job, then why is he still in that position?
Yeah, I have seen a lot of liberals pushing back, saying, what's Pete Buttigieg supposed to do? He's only one man. And I do think it's important to point out, one, that a lot of this was predictable. People like Rokana and Bernie Sanders had been warning about this particular practice of booking passengers for seats that didn't exist, and then basically exploiting the fact that most people don't know what policies exist to reimburse folks for that kind of behavior. Moreover, apparently there is an outstanding, $10 billion worth of $10 million worth rather of outstanding fees from cancellations that existed back to the beginning of the pandemic that have not been people have not been compensated for. So it does seem like there are a number of actors, reporters, and people who are expert in the transportation industry who have pointed to actual policy choices that could have helped to avert this crisis. But can you also speak to this other issue with their scheduling system that seems to have been at the root of some of the backlog over the holiday season?
Well, according to the CEO from Southwest, he said that the scheduling system is from the 1990s. I understand that. But at the same time, this didn't seem to be an issue 4 or 5 years ago. It was an issue in 2022 twice. So what is really going on there? I do know that there have been Southwest employees that have quit. So there may be a staff shortage there, even though they're saying that there isn't. But there is something else that is key here. And let's not forget that Southwest Airlines, they were given money from the U.S. government. I don't know what they did with that money, but that technology system should have been updated years ago. So I don't think the blame solely lies on the technology system. I think that's a scapegoat for the CEO to use at this point. But the real damage that has been done is to the American people. Some of the customers that I've spoken to, this was actually going to be their first time visiting family members for the holidays because of everything that happened with the pandemic. And they didn't get the opportunity to do that. And some of them have explained to me that they weren't refunded for their purchases either. So where I come from, Bree, this is called a scam. And there's no accountability for Southwest Airlines. And I think we all should be pointing our fingers at Pete Buttigieg at this point.
To your point, Sabby, Southwest was the first airline to resume paying dividends to its shareholders after taking all that money from the CARES Act, and raises questions about whether or not that money would have been better used, reinvested back into the airline and correcting some of these technical issues. The Department of Transportation tweeted the day after Christmas that it would be looking into Southwest's rate of cancellations and delays, which it called unacceptable. Do you think the Transportation Department can do much to prevent these kinds of setbacks in the future, Sabby?
I think that they can. And I want to point out to the point that for the customers that were threatened to be arrested on the airlines, this is another example as well as the law enforcement agency looking out for capital, looking out to protect property and business instead of the American people. And I think we need to also ask as well, why were the police called in the first place? Because Southwest, as a business, did not want to deal with angry customers, which those customers had every right to be angry at that point. But when you are stranded at the airport and you don't have a seat and your flight is cancelable, most people have nowhere to go. You can't go back to the hotel because most of the time you've already checked out. There may not be rooms available for you. So you lose money in the process, you lose time, and you're basically stranded there. So what are those customers supposed to do? But I think at this point in time, Pete Buttigieg needs to step up and do his job, or they need to replace him with someone else.
But I would say a couple things. First of all, never another dime for any airline industry of taxpayer dollars, period. They don't use it to, improve services for customers. It was always a bad idea. Second of all, no one should ever fly Southwest again, and then it's a self-correcting problem. I don't think Buttigieg is doing a particularly good job either. But in some ways, I see it as something that can, they did this to customers. Customers should punish them.
Or nationalize the airline. Some people have made the case that as much money as the government has put into these airlines, it could have owned them outright already. And if you're worried about some of these profit-driven practices, these corrupt, coercive practices being at the root of some of the holiday mishegas that people have just experienced, then you can get rid of that profit incentive by simply allowing the airline to be government-owned.
The government can't keep track of the money it spends in Afghanistan and Ukraine. How would it keep track of my luggage better than Southwest?
What do you make of that argument, Sabby?
Well, I want to add, I think the government can keep track of the money that they've sent to Ukraine. They're just choosing not to. They don't want to be accountable there. But I agree with trying to nationalize the airlines. Listen, we have to remember this is a corporation. They are in it for profit, even if that means that they have to sell seats that they do not have. This is terrible for the American people, but this is another example where we are in late-stage capitalism in this country, and it's happening globally as well.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Sabby. We'll have more Rising for you right after this.